Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining this ICEF webinar, which will explain how education agencies or student recruitment agencies can help your school or institution enroll more international students, regardless of study level, school type, program, tuition, duration, or destination. My name is Martijn van Veen. I'm the Vice President of Business Development here at ICEF, and a few months ago I presented a similar webinar, but that time I interviewed 3 student recruitment agencies. This time, however, I am joined by 3 student recruitment professionals from the educator side who will share with us why and how they are using international student recruitment agencies to reach and enroll students from all corners of the world. I will introduce them to you in a few minutes, but first let's take a brief look at some international student statistics and corridors. And as I share my screen with you, I have shown this graph in recent webinars. So some of you have seen this before, but it remains impressive to see how the number of international students has grown exponentially in the past 2 decades, from a little over 2 million to 5.6 million in 2018. Now, obviously, COVID has had an effect on international student mobility in 2020 and 21, but it's mainly due to border closures and health protocols, and most borders have by now reopened or are being reopened as we speak. The pandemic itself doesn't have much of an influence on the motivation and ambition of students to study abroad. And their numbers are forecasted to grow to around 7 million by 2030 in what's often referred to as a 4th wave of international student mobility. And these are just students in higher education based on statistics by UNESCO. In reality, the number is even higher, as the numbers shown here do not include the hundreds of thousands or probably even millions of international students in secondary education, in colleges, K-12 programs, work and travel, summer courses, or even language studies. But particularly interesting to understand is where most of this growth is coming from. Understanding which countries and regions send most students is relevant information for the geographic focus of your student recruitment marketing strategies. And it's probably no surprise to you that the lion's share of international students come from China and India. Since many years, the number 1 and 2 largest source markets of international students. In 2010, nearly 600,000 Chinese and more than 200,000 Indians enrolled in higher education institutions and universities overseas. And by 2019, those numbers had grown dramatically to more than 1 million Chinese and nearly 500,000 Indian international students. Also worth mentioning are Vietnam, South Korea, and Nepal, with large and rapidly growing numbers of international students. And overall, it's no secret that the majority of international students come from South and Southeast Asia. I did, however, want to briefly highlight some other regions that should not be neglected. On the contrary, more than 500,000 international students in higher education come from Arab states. More than 400,000 international students come from Eastern Europe. Sub-Saharan African countries account for nearly 400,000 international students, similar to nearly 400,000 international students from Latin America. So it's one thing to know where most students are from and where to find prospective international students, but it's another thing to know how to actually reach these students, how to connect with them, how to communicate with them, how to learn more about the specific source countries and regions that you would like to tap into. And this is where the agencies play a crucial role. Most international students and their parents, especially from the regions that we just discussed, use the services of an education agency based in their home country to make that very important, once-in-a-lifetime decision on where they want to study, which program, which destination, which institution, and everything that is involved. In parallel, schools and institutions across all study destinations have built a network of agency partnerships to reach prospective students across different source countries. In the United States, for example, 49% of schools and institutions work with agencies. In Canada, 45% of international students are referred via agencies. 91% of British institutions work with agencies, and 3 out of 4 international students in Australia are referred via agencies. And these numbers are on the rise. Various reports highlight that students are relying more on education agents for assistance with study abroad decisions. And education agents are poised to play an even greater role in international student recruitment post-pandemic. So with all this talk about the important role that agencies play in international student recruitment, let's now take a closer look at what they do, how they work, and their processes and business models. And we'll take that look through the eyes of 3 student recruitment professionals representing 3 different schools that are successfully using the services of student recruitment agencies. With me today are Oana, Lelcu, Director Sales and Marketing from SRH Berlin University of Applied Sciences. Hi, hello. Oana. Caroline Comeau, Vice President, Strategic Enrollment Management from LCI Education. Hi, Caroline.
Hello.
And Sam Bufton, Sales and Marketing Director at Bell Education Services. So thanks to the 3 of you for joining me and for sharing some of your experience and knowledge in working with agencies. So how about a round of introductions of yourself and your institution, please? And let's start in Montréal, Canada. Caroline, bonjour, à vous l'honneur.
Bonjour, Martijn, thank you. I represent LCI Education Network. So we have 23 institutions on 5 continents. Most importantly for our international students are our Canadian campuses. We have campuses located as well in Spain, in Australia. So those have been very popular with our international students. I lead our strategic enrollment initiatives. So for our teams, our marketing and admissions teams throughout the network.
Merci, Caroline, and schönen guten Tag, Oana, live aus Berlin.
Greetings, snowy greetings from Berlin. It's been snowing beautifully since this morning. Is the first time I see this in Berlin. So, you know, sending you a bit of snowflakes and magic winterland to you guys. I've been working in the higher education and international education business for over 10 years now. Also working with agencies for both market penetration and market consolidation for over 10 years. And currently I'm Director of Marketing, Sales and Admissions for SRH Berlin University of Applied Sciences. Happy to be here.
Thank you. And moving to the world famous Greater Guildford in the United Kingdom. Welcome, Sam.
Thanks, Martin. My name's Sam. I'm here in Cambridge, which is where Bell's flagship language school is and has been since 1955. We have schools for adults in Cambridge and in London. And we have young learner programs throughout the year for juniors as well. And it's a pleasure to be here.
Now, a very simple, yet I guess an interesting question to start with, Oana. We're talking today about student recruitment agencies, and I have explained more or less what they do, what their activities are, and what their role is in student recruitment. But how would you describe the activities of a student recruitment agency, or better said, how would you describe the role of a student recruitment agency?
Well, I would say a good agency has a bit of a multiple role. It's a very good vehicle for market penetration, especially, for example, if you're looking to brand a new institution on a new market. If you want to do it via marketing online alone, it's going to take you a much higher budget and a much longer time to achieve the same result as with establishing a solid network of reliable agencies. It doesn't mean you have to work with all agencies in that market, but really to select a priority network of agents that you will work with closely, and they will implement your brand in that market much more efficiently than I would say direct recruitment efforts. From a market consolidation perspective, an agency also plays a role of a multiplier. You invest, training and efforts into one agency, and that agency, when reliable and done well, they can actually send you regular number of students, and depending of the market, that can range from 1 student to 100 students, depending, of the size of the market of your own product. But in any case, whether it's 1 student every year or 100 students every year, that is a reliable agent that you count on for, if not just numbers, but also diversity. And from my perspective, these are the 2 most important roles. As a third role, I would also count I would say, working together with your team in student conversion. And that basically gives you a reliable partner on the ground who can take over some of the tasks of your team in-house for potentially a higher conversion perspective.
Thank you, Oana. And Sam, how would you describe a student recruitment agency, pure and simple?
I think the key aspect of a student recruitment agency is that they are, or ideally they will be your brand, your programs, but in a different country. There'll be a brand ambassador. So it literally isn't possible, obviously, for one company or even a group of schools to be in all markets and all cities at all times. So to work with the agencies allows them to be your representative, on the ground in cities all over the world, knowing the culture. They're able to speak the language. They're able to understand what a student journey from that particular country is like. So there's huge insights, which it's almost like being able to add country-specific members of staff to your team if it's done correctly. Yeah.
Could they kind of feel like a member of your team as well?
They should. Ideally, yes. Yeah.
Local members. So Sam and Oana, you both have like 10 years of experience in working with agencies. Caroline, I hear you started working with agencies since a year, which I thought was a very interesting perspective to have you on the panel. That description that Oana and Sam just gave, is that indeed the expectation you had when you started, or did it become that when you were into your job for a year now?
I would say that how they've described it is exactly, I'm completely aligned with their thought process and how my expectations were, because they are physically located in areas that we wouldn't be able to reach. And the volume of individuals that represent these recruitment agencies is significant and important to us. What I do notice, though, and what I would add to what Oana and Sam described, is that I also feel, especially I've arrived during this pandemic, which is a time of uncertainty, but they've added a level of confidence and comfort for parents, for these students that really are embarking on this life-changing journey. And that local connection, that cultural value that they bring has been significant for us to be able to bridge that gap between where they are in the world and when we greet them on campus.
So agencies are really the representatives of institutions in far away, or maybe not even so far away, regions and countries. Would you then say, Oana, that actually it's not really feasible to have a proper student recruitment strategy if it doesn't include agencies? Or would you not go that far?
I would say it depends a lot on the regions. There are regions that you can develop and work very well with direct recruitment. Simply because maybe the number of agencies is not sufficient there, or maybe that the number of reliable agencies is not sufficient there. And markets where it's definitely, I would say, the first thing to do is to work with agencies for market development or market penetration. So I wouldn't go as far as saying that they're indispensable for international recruitment. In general, like worldwide, but there are markets where it is definitely the smartest choice.
Right. So, I mean, we'll get to where to find the agencies in a minute, Oana, but when let's say you found an agency, do you feel like we can work with this agency? How do you start building that relationship?
Well, the first step is to actually see mutual interest in working together. Because otherwise you can throw a lot of information at an agency and offers and whatever, but if they don't have the interest in embarking upon representing you proactively, especially with Germany, that's a very important point, because Germany is not, I would say, a straightforward and very easy study destination for private higher education, at least. So it requires a bit of proactiveness and a bit of extra motivation for an agency to add this destination, at least at the beginning, maybe a few years ago. So the first step is to really discuss the willingness to work together and the mutual interest and the mutual potential to work together. Then the second step is to really establish a framework of cooperation with regular trainings, with a very quick communication channel, which for many agencies in many markets is very important, that they can rely on you, not for an answer 5 days later, but for an answer within, I would almost say if you can within the hour, but obviously that's not possible, but within the day or 48 hours, so that they also, as an agency, gain confidence in you as a partner. It's a partnership, as Sam. I mean, we're a team in the end, with the same goal of getting the students, in the end, the bread and butter of the agency and of as private institutions, our bread and butter are the students. So we're linked with a common interest. And consequently, we need to find the best way of working together also from the agency side. I think that's also important to underline that they're our partners, and they have to be treated as such and prioritized as such and given quick answers. So that's for me the starting points, establishing the mutual interest and establishing the framework of cooperation, what they can do for me, what I can do for them, how I support them to represent the university in the best way possible. Identifying, I mean, now I have a system of prepared things, like scheduled trainings online, marketing materials, packages of photos, so that I don't have to, start collecting left and right things, but I already have the starting package. Hey, yeah. Here it is. And then on that, you can build specific, marketing strategies for that market involving social media, different content, different offers, etc. But the first step is always defining the best practice framework, let's say, with the agency, so they can actually represent you in the best possible way.
Yeah, you mentioned that relationship, that partnership is really important. And as Sam mentioned also earlier, it's almost like they're part of your colleagues, part of your team. Now, Sam, in the preparation for this webinar, you mentioned how when you started working with agencies, you didn't know much about agencies. I think it's the same for many people that start in this industry. If you were to give advice now to that Sam that just started in the agency business, what are a couple of things that you would tell? Do this, but don't do that. What are some of your tips and tricks?
So one, I think, would be, don't believe it until the students are in your school. There's been lots of times I've got off an aeroplane back at Heathrow Airport and thought, yes, 3 bits of signed paper here with these big fish agencies. Then you do the silly thing of telling your boss, and then it finds its way into a budget. And then it's in a board paper, and then 12 months later, no students have turned up, which may well not be the fault of the agency. It could well have been circumstances or whatever. But so the first thing is, I would say, agency agreements that you've signed are all very well. That means you've got a commercial agreement with that company, but that doesn't necessarily by any means mean students turn up. There's a lot of work to do after those conditions are agreed. Maybe a second thing I've learned over the years is if a third party really fits with your product or your programs, and it's a market which you really need the support in, and you think this could work long term, you either have to see them face to face in their market at some point early in the relationship. I think you need to see them in person, you need to spend time with them, you need to see the team, you need to understand where the offices are, you need to almost do a bit of the student journey physically. Where would they walk to? How would they get to the agency office? What universities are around there? Kind of just get a feel for the market the agent works in. But just as importantly, and what I've found over the years is a very good sign, is when the agency comes and visits you, because it's like anything. You can give them all the great information which Oana was talking about, and usually that is the most practical way of doing it, of course, because you can only be in so many places at once. But FAM trips, for example, familiarization trips, where you can actually bring either the agency owner or their counsellors, which is probably sometimes more useful, to actually get the people themselves who are going to be selling your program and telling prospective students why your school's the right one for them. If they've walked into your school, if they've met in your school restaurant, if they've been to your classrooms, if they've seen a lesson, if they've been on a social program, if they know how far it is from the train station, if they know the names of some key people, I find that gives me more confidence that they'll be doing the right thing. And also I think it gives them the confidence that that they are actually promoting the thing that they thought they were. Because one thing agencies do not like is problems post-arrival. So the student turns up and it isn't what they said it was because the information was wrong. I think it was when we were on doing our chat before this, maybe it was Oana who said the student turned up expecting a swimming pool, right? That sort of stuff sends you backwards. So it is a good thing to try and get those representatives to come to you and to spend time with you, because then they're not reliant on there's no lost in translation for what you offer.
Right. So it's not like the agency is some miracle solution to, hey, I have an agency, I signed on a contract, and here I'll just sit back and wait for the students to come and then find out they're looking for a swimming pool. But it's, of course, a lot of work to manage these agency relationships, and it's really a relationship, as you explained also, Sam. But if you then talk about that agreement, because that's what starts with, I guess, you've met an agency, you think, okay, I'm confident that this could work out. It indeed starts with that contract. What are like some of the criteria that definitely need to be in that contract? Colleen, I imagine you've signed a few contracts in that your first year, or have studied a few. What is in there that definitely needs to be in there? So for the audience of lesser experienced educators.
Well, to Sam's point, this is definitely, it's a partnership. So some key elements that we're looking for in our agreements is, there's a lot of aspects that are challenging for us to uncover, but we're taking a look at, I guess, the immigration consulting component of the relationship that they'll have. We want to clarify that if they don't necessarily are certified as immigration consultants, that they won't guide those students maybe in the wrong direction. We want to be able to make sure that we can guide them in that maze with the services that we offer. So that's one aspect, that we're not necessarily looking for that representation from them if this is not something that they're certified in. We want to work with the agency that we've chosen to partner with. So we are going through the due diligence of making sure that these are individuals we want to partner with. We want to make sure that they're not working with sub-agencies. So that was something interesting that I've uncovered in the agency world in the past year, of these individuals that pop up in those relationships that weren't part of the original agreement, or we weren't aware of. And those individuals might have not been given the proper information, which in turn just creates challenges in student success. And we're just not portraying the image that we want to, because they're just looking for volume. To Sam's point, if the student doesn't show up at the school, then that partnership is not ideal. We are making sure as well that the partnership that we have in place with them is kept confidential. So confidentiality clauses are important. We want to be able to give them what they're looking for, make sure that we understand their perspective, and offer them what makes their life easier, so that in turn, they want to make sure that, they can represent us in the best way possible. But that information we like to keep confidential. So those are some key items that we try to put into our agreements, so that people understand that this is a serious partnership that we're putting into place. We have student lives that we're changing together. And we consider ourselves 5-star institutions, and want to make sure that the students, when they embark on their journey with LCI, understand that as well.
Interesting. Well, you mentioned a few interesting points here, especially the sub-agency topic. I'm sure Oana and Sam have some feedback on that as well. But still with you, Colleen, what is the issue? Let's play devil's advocate. What's the issue with the sub-agent? If you have an agreement with an agent, they are in the end responsible for the recruitment of that student and for the training or the information towards that student, even if that may have come through a sub-agent. How is that always an issue, the sub-agent?
I wouldn't be able to say if it always is an issue. That I couldn't have factual information for you on that. Yeah. But what I do want to make sure, though, is that we're partnering with individuals that have the student success journey in mind, and not just the commission model. Let's be transparent here. We are looking for students that are going to join us and graduate, and are looking not necessarily for an immigration path into certain countries. So vetting these sub-agents as well is really important for us, because it's our credibility. to that market and to the agencies in which we partner with.
Yeah. How do you feel about the sub-agency model, Sam? And how do you prevent it if you don't like it?
Yeah, it's similar really to Caroline. I think, again, being a kind of a premium provider with a long, successful, established history, I think one of the things is you have to be, don't feel bad about not partnering with someone. I think quite often salespeople or people kind of new to the industry think that they aren't successful at an event like an ICEF, for example, if they haven't come away with lots of new partners. But really, it is about quality and not quantity. There are lots and lots of agencies and third-party providers who will sign any piece of paper with any terms on it that you feel like, and that's great. But have the confidence in your program, have the confidence in what you deliver, have the student needs, remember what you're here for. We are here to bring people out of their home country at usually quite a young age, quite often for the first time, quite often for a long time in a new country. That isn't something which can be just kind of passed down a line from one company to another. And so I think that's kind of where Caroline's coming from. And sub-agencies are normally part of a large agency network, so quite often they are fairly stable, and perhaps it's just a natural thing that an agency in a large market like Brazil, for example, is a huge country. They just wouldn't have the real estate to manage across all of Brazil, so they may well use trusted partners or sub-agencies. And I think if that's up front and that's understood, then it's quite often not a problem. What is a problem, which was touched on there, is when someone crops up looking for their part of the deal when they weren't part of the deal. I think that's sometimes a problem.
Yeah, I see you nodding, Carol. So it's really about transparency also. I think you made a very good point there, Sam. As long as they're upfront about explaining to you, the educator, and also for your audience, make sure that they explain to you how they will go about recruiting the students, how they will train or inform these students about what to expect, about costs and everything. And that brings me to commission. Commission is, of course, a very important topic here. Some educators seem hesitant about working with agencies, as they have the impression that agencies are primarily incentive driven, and meaning that rather than focusing on the interest of the student, they'll focus on the commission when they consult their students. But the thing is, I would argue that agency success is mainly built on student success, because that triggers positive referrals and word of mouth. And an agency that puts the interest of students first will attract more students due to their success stories, and whereas agencies that put commissions first may have a short-term benefit, but in the end it will fire back at them. Is that something you would agree with, Oana?
Sorry, I had muted myself. I entirely agree with that. I mean, the most successful agencies are, and I would say sustainable agencies, because, I mean, let's face it, you see sometimes agencies come and go within the framework of a few years, that they burn themselves very quickly because of having slightly dishonest practices. It's really managing to establish a viable financial business, because obviously they're a business too, like we are as a private institutions, we are a business too, or tuition-based institutions, but are those who actually base that model on reliability and reputation in the market. Because in the end, the word of mouth is, despite all the online tools and everything that we might use, it's still the most efficient form of marketing ever, and it will probably remain so for a while. So, and that's totally possible. An agency that is very, I would say, strong in delivering students doesn't mean that they necessarily are purely commission oriented. For them to survive in that market and to have a sustainable model that will be there year after year and grow year after year, it means they also have to build their own reputation and their own brand, not just yours. That's no incompatibility between working with a very successful numbers given agency and how to say, a commission or only money interested agency. It's definitely possible to work with agencies who are both reliable and numbers oriented or target oriented.
Yeah, I mean, commission is a word. Maybe we should call it success fee, but I know there are also other words used for the compensation of people actually doing a lot of work for educators to find the right students for them. And I would fully agree, indeed, when they find the right students, the word will go out, and they will get more students coming to those agencies to find the right programs. Now, about commission, it's you mentioned, Caroline, earlier, confidentiality. And I imagine that most educated and agency relationships also don't really like to talk openly about how much they pay. But is there anything you can share, Caroline? Let's say you have an educator in our audience who's considering working with agencies and thinks, okay, but how do I define the right compensation for the work that they do? Would you have anything to advise them with?
I think it depends on your business model. To Oana's point, these are individuals that you have to partner with. You physically cannot have hundreds or even thousands of individuals representing you that are direct employees of your organization. So it's taking a look at your business model. One thing, though, is to reassure that the relationship will be fruitful, is to take a look at how that commission or those amounts of incentives are paid out. So making sure that there is student retention, taking a look at, making sure that individuals go semester to semester is probably a safer way. So a deferred payment plan, I guess we could call it, is one way to secure a good relationship with these individuals.
Thanks, Caroline. And Sam, what do you incentivize? Just the enrollment, or is there a success fee at graduation? And by the way, I know, Sam, you also call it something else than a commission, but what can you advise us on this topic?
So there are lots of so we have different programs here. So, for example, we could have a student for a 2-week English language program, maybe just coming over from France for a couple of weeks break, right up to a 48-week stay for an academic program, perhaps a pathway university program. So it is changeable based on what kind of student it is that particular third party is recruiting. But it isn't, going back to the point earlier on, paying large commissions or discounts, we call them discounts here at Bell in the UK, doesn't ordinarily mean that the agent is in some way a bad thing. These are too expensive, etc., etc. Some of the best agencies I've ever worked with in 10 years, most reliable, most professional, most honest, most genuine, actually have some of the highest conditions, I'm sure, which other schools are also, would have paid them in the past. So that kind of doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. But you will be expected to pay for the service. Now, you can either do that on just tuition. Some third parties would expect to have a payment on accommodation also, although usually for language schools, I don't know so much about higher education, but for language schools, you would normally only do the payment on the tuition part of the student rather than the accommodation, although that is possibly something which you can keep in your back pocket should you need to further incentivize. Pre-COVID, there was quite a lot of upfront marketing support given to third parties, so often called things like brochure contributions, whereby you would hand over X amount of money for them to put you in their physical brochure and on their website, etc., etc. I think that's in some way been reset a little bit during post-pandemic and as we sort of start to come out of it, and maybe it's more target driven. So if you are a provider new to kind of working with third parties, don't feel bad because the agent would have heard it 1,000 times. If you say, look, could we start with these conditions, and maybe if you could send X number on these courses or over this period, then we could look to kind of incentivize you at the end. That isn't something they will be offended by.
Right. Interesting. So of course, there are indeed different models between, if you look at an agency, a language student compared to like a higher education student. But I'd like to bring it back to the commission payment and actually the commission based to referral of an agency, right? How do you handle a situation where a student has been advised by an agency, Oana, this one's for you, and then reaches out to you, says, hey, I've heard all this great stuff about your school. Can I enroll directly and save some money? Have you ever had
I get the tricky questions, right?
Yeah.
No, I mean, and there was a question in the chat that was actually pretty interesting, how sustainable is the agency model in the EdTech sort of environment, and it's bound to come more and more that because there are now different success fee based models. It's not just about the agencies anymore that are success fees, but also study portals, not the company, but they sort of affiliates, the portals themselves. So it does happen more and more to have a bit of a conflict of which channel that a specific student came through and whether a multiple channel sometimes. So, I mean, your question is actually pretty simple because there are way more complex questions related to that due to exactly the fact that now you have all this new business models that are a mix of agent and portals or portals that are success-based, etc. From my perspective, I think a lot of the institutions are quite similar in that sense. It really depends on at which point of the student funnel the agency comes. If they come at the beginning, I mean, maybe you got the application, but then the agent says, hey, I'm actually taking care of the student, but you haven't really advanced in the application process. From my perspective, it's totally fine because the agency role is not just demand generation. You can generate an application, I would say, quite easily via your own efforts, but converting that application into an enrolled student, that's a totally different story. So if the agent was instrumental in converting the student, absolutely fine to paying the full commission. If on the other hand, the student has already applied, enrolled, and only refers to the agent, or you refer the student to the agent for, let's say, visa support, then you would generally you would have it in your contract. As Caroline said, there are certain aspects that are really important to define in the contract, and anything related to the compensation, whatever the name that is, it's important to be put in the commission scheme or the contract. And in many cases, you would then reward the agency with 50% of the commission, and that's also the case in the more complex situations where you have a multiple channel involved. You would also sometimes do agencies involved. I would also split the commission in that sense, but it's always important to define and even to reach out to the student and define how instrumental the role of that agency is, because I mean, we can do 2 50-50, but not 3. So
yeah. I mean, indeed, tricky question, but a great answer, Oana. And I guess it's just like, first of all, it's not just a referral. Of course, there's actual work involved by the agencies and the visa process. Of course, a very clear example of that. The other thing, I guess it just comes back again to what we started with, the trust relationship, or even shorter, the relationship that you are building. I imagine that especially both of you with 10 years of experience in working with agencies, you know when and where to trust the agencies or on whether or not they have actually brought a specific student to you who was trying maybe a little shortcut to your institution. Now, also about that trust relationship, Sam, there's a lot of marketing involved that you do centrally as an internationally oriented institution, and internationally oriented means that you're promoting yourself to the world, whereas agencies are taking care of a specific region or country. How do you align your marketing activities so that you're not competing with your own partners?
Inevitably, there will be an element of competition. It won't be black and white. Just through if you have a website just with decent content in it, people will be able to find you. You don't necessarily have to be that proactive. You don't need to buy media in markets to turn up in markets. You could have someone come to your school and go and tell their cousin about it, and the cousin is now a direct student, even though you're not actively pumping money into Mexico or wherever it is. So the world is so open now. The ability to access information about a provider is so easy that it becomes very difficult to be able to not compete with the third-party partners. However, with the right agency partner, that if you are promoting your programs and your provision in the market, let's say Mexico, for example, just off the top of my head, through some fairly sophisticated marketing campaigns, which are based on that country in particular. If students start to see it and they start to get the idea of traveling, let's say to the UK, or we do some work around Cambridge as a study destination, and they start to get excited about Cambridge as a study destination, a student from markets that far away from the UK are unlikely to book directly. In the majority, they're going to need some support. So in that case, what we've done there is we've actually helped, because the student is going to have to find an agency. If the cost of their course is going to be done at £25,000, for example, doing that just online, just through search, just through website, and speaking to some of our staff, it may well happen. We've got brilliant staff here for answering and counselling students when they want to come to us. But if you look at the UK and draw concentric rings around it, the issue becomes more difficult the smaller the ring is around the UK, because those students can find us, pay a small amount of money relatively, and come to us for 2 weeks. They don't really need support for that. But the further out the circles get, out to Asia, out to the Middle East, out to Latin America, the chances of them being able to come here with that much money, those long flights, that long period of time without a third party support is unlikelier. So in fact, if you work with an agency on that as what you're doing, if you both understand that's what you're trying to do, we're almost referring for each other all the time, then actually that's quite a nice way to share the workload with an agency, actually. So it's not really competing. You're just trying to do the same thing they're trying to do, if it's all set up correctly.
Yeah, that's some great information there. And from all the answers that I'm receiving, and from the experience that I have myself in this industry, working with agencies can be very beneficial once you've built that relationship and you've started, you get your first students, and from there it can grow. It doesn't feel that there's not really like a trial situation. Let's say you're an educator and you say, oh, let's try it out for half a year. Would you think that's at all possible? Is the agency model something you have to go for and then hang in there for a few years to make it successful, or is there a quick route, Caroline?
If I'd ask my team members, I think all of them would say, Caroline, it's going to take some time for me to build that relationship.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. Absolutely. There's a human interaction and a trust level that needs to come into place. So on our end, we need to provide the service that they require. So quick to respond, give them all of the tools and resources that they need so that they can represent us. On their end, we need to learn, the caliber of the students that are going to come, the individuals, the process that took place. We are an organization that like to think that we're able to really guide our students throughout this entire journey. So we want to partner with these agencies and showcase that as well. So we use artificial intelligence to really understand the mobility journey and value exactly the step that the student is in this recruitment process, so that we can flag the agency and let them know, hey, some things are being delayed, some documentation hasn't been sent, what status are we at, let's work on this together. So agencies that are able to as well share on their end that type of information is going to be, just, I guess, the proof to develop that relationship. But I don't believe, or if there's a secret that I'm unaware of, please share that there's a quick way to build those relationships.
The secret to success, Oana, does that secret exist?
Well, I would like to highlight that, yes, it takes time to build a relationship. However, this doesn't mean that you cannot have results at all in the first year, let's say, of cooperation. That's totally possible. You can't, as you said, you can't expect miracles. You can't go from 0 to hero in half a year and expect that, hey, all of a sudden from the agent network you're going to get hundreds and hundreds of students, especially for higher education. I'm sure for shorter products that's different, because it's quicker and easier to recruit for a language course. That's a 2-week summer or a summer camp versus a 3-4 year bachelor degree, but it's definitely possible. I would say the key here, if you want quick results, is prioritization. don't go wild and start, establishing relationships or start working with hundreds of agents all over the world. Select the countries where you see the best potential, select the few partners where you see the most proactiveness and willingness to work with you, and go with that. And the first step as priority A agents, which is also part of the ICEF agent management workshop, but that's really important. Prioritization is key to actually getting results and let's say starting already to get a return on investment on your investment in the ICEF workshops or even sometimes fairs with agencies or other sort of marketing support things.
Great. Yeah, ICEF workshops or ICEF events, as we call them these days, they respond to what everything you just said. Focus, it's a step-by-step approach, it's building relationships, and it's very important, of course, to build that relationship with the right agencies. Where do you find these agencies? Wouldn't it be great if there were a place where all these agencies are coming together? Well, that place exists, and that place is what we call ICEF. Since nearly 3 decades, ICEF brings together the professionals student recruitment. Across ICEF's business-to-business networking events, with ICEF Berlin shown here as the main get-together for the international education industry each year in November. This is where the agencies come together. At ICEF Berlin, for example, there's an opportunity to meet with more than 1,000 agencies that are all carefully screened and vetted by ICEF, which means you will only meet the agencies that meet ICEF's very strict quality standards. And in addition, we will be able to tell you at these events for each agency, how long have they existed, how many students do they typically enroll, in which programs, for which schools and institutions, and in which countries, and further details that are relevant for the student recruitment process. Because of this proposition of reliable agencies that come together in one place, hundreds of schools and institutions from all major and developing study destinations come to attend ICEF events to network and build partnerships with professionals altogether from more than 120 countries. So all these professionals together, the agencies, the education providers, service providers, are all student recruitment professionals. So in addition to the meetings that you'll be able to schedule with the agencies, you can also bounce off ideas or collect information or insights from your peers from other education institutions. Detailed information about ICEF Berlin, such as the format, seminars, venues, sponsors, and pricing, can be found on icef.com/Berlin, or just scan the QR code that you see in the right of your screen. And you'll also find relevant statistics, such as the student recruitment regions. In this case, you'll notice that at ICEF Berlin, all the regions that I had highlighted earlier in this webinar are represented: Africa, Asia, Eastern Europe, Latin America, and the Middle East. In addition to the global event in Berlin, ICEF offers a range of events that focus either on a specific destination, study level, or source region. For example, if you're an education provider from North America, you may want to consider ICEF Toronto in May, which specifically aims at North American schools looking to recruit more international students, because this is where agencies from all over the world that are sending students to North America come together. Examples of so-called origin events are for example, ICEF Asia or ICEF Latin America, which specifically where schools from all destinations come together to meet agencies from these regions. So if you're looking to enroll more students from Latin America, you'll come to ICEF Latin America. If you're looking to recruit more students from China and Vietnam, you come to ICEF Asia, and so forth. And one of our other global events focused specifically on higher education is ICEF Higher Education, which is taking place in lovely Barcelona in September. Now, please visit icef.com/events for the complete list, or once again, scan the QR code in the right of your screen. For reliable testimonials about these ICEF events, you can check Trustpilot, which is a neutral review service that ensures honest and unfiltered feedback from your peers. And as you can see, we've been doing quite well thus far. So among the thousands of agencies that are out there ICEF can help you connect with agencies that are screened, that are reliable, and that correspond exactly with your student recruitment objectives. Just like Oana, Caroline, and Sam have been doing. And that brings me to the last part of this webinar, the Q&A section with Sam, Caroline, and Oana. Let me have a look at the questions we have received. I see here that quite a few of these questions were already answered, but actually maybe let's start with a little anecdote. Sam, you mentioned you had a bit of a nice story that you didn't yet share with us, or did you address it already in the webinar?
No, it's
working with agencies.
Nice. It's just so back in the day when South Korea was just a huge volume market for English language courses. It was probably the main provider, certainly for the UK at the time. Everyone was fighting over 2 or 3 big agencies there, which kind of dominated the market. And there was one guy who was at the top of one of the agencies, I won't say which it is, and everyone was trying to find a way, other than just keep flying to Seoul all the time, to kind of get ahead of the other schools in his mind. And he loved golf. It was well known he loved golf. And his dream was always to play at St Andrews Golf Club in Scotland. So I thought, what a good idea if I got him and a few of his golf buddies or colleagues to come over to the UK, see our schools, and go and play the famous old course at St Andrews. Brilliant. Somehow managed, spent all of my sales budget on this brilliant idea. Got hold of St Andrews, got it all sorted, and then they said, this is all great. In order for these gentlemen to come and play the old course, we're going to need their golf handicap certificates. And I thought, that's no problem. So I wrote to the agency and said, hi, look, it's all set up. I just needed golf handicap certificates for all the players. And they sent them over, and I sent them to St Andrews, and they said, under no circumstances are these people going to be playing around the old course at St Andrews. You've got to be scratch golfer to play at St Andrews, and I had no idea. So the whole thing didn't come off in the end, and needless to say, it didn't help the relationship with the agency. It was a brilliant idea, and if it had worked, I mean, we'd have been golden. But sometimes you take these risks, don't you? But
yeah. Well, you know what? I think we learned from this, but it shows that you cared about the relationship that we referred to earlier. And it would have been great, of course, had you been able to play around the golf for a few rounds. And they could they in the end appreciate this situation and laugh about it, or you said it didn't help the relationship?
I think laugh is a bit strong, but it's just, I guess, like Caroline said, she's quite new to this, but not new to sales, I'm sure. But I was young and excitable at the time, and so just if you're going to spend what might be a small sales marketing budget on what looks like a great idea, just try and tick all the boxes.
How could you have known?
Just before you let anyone know about it would be my
yeah. Well, actually, on that topic, because I'm all for building relationships, and I think it would have been a great initiative. What activities do you have, Oana and Caroline, to cement that relationship? Oana, I'll start with you.
I mean, we have a system of, outside of the system of trainings, let's say, that's already implemented, that focuses not only on the generic information, but also on the sort of, I call them bottleneck trainings, like identifying, what are the main bottlenecks, and then providing the agencies with the proper argumentation and support there. Obviously, support with marketing budgets, especially for the delivering agents, is always highly appreciated, to have joint campaigns and joint marketing efforts together, and obviously the famous fam trip and campus visit. And I actually have a little funny story related to that too. After I think it was my first ICEF Berlin a few years back, I was working for a different university in Germany, and I was doing my first fam trip, and I thought, what a better way for them to see Germany than to take the train from Berlin to Bonn, Cologne at the time. So I get them all to come at the train station, and we get on the train, and then all of a sudden my partner writes, "Where are you in the train?" And then I'm like, "I'm in my carriage number 36 here. And I was like, no, you're not. I'm right there, and you're not. And I'm like, what do you mean I'm not? I'm sitting here. I look at the number. I'm right here. Yeah. And this is how I found out that the very smart Deutsche Bahn, which is the German, train system, actually has, for the train that goes from Berlin to Düsseldorf and from Berlin to Cologne, to Bonn, they have twice the same carriage. So you have carriage number 36 that goes to Düsseldorf and carriage number 36 that goes to Bonn. And I was obviously with my group of agents, having drinks on our seats on the wrong part of the train going to Düsseldorf, and not in, late in the evening. It was already, again, after ICEF Berlin, after, I don't know, doing something in the morning and then taking them in the evening. So it was like 10 p.m. We were going really, elegantly drinking champagne, sparkling wine to Düsseldorf. And yeah, this is how you learn that you have to be really careful when you manage transportation for an agent trip or a fam trip.
We all make mistakes. Caroline, which mistakes did you make?
Well, I'm jealous. Hopefully we can have a call like this in a year. I joined during the pandemic. So apart from being on mute or turning off my camera or having a child run back in the background, that was my reality with our relationship building efforts with the different agencies. But yes, we hold multiple events in the various territories where we have agents that represent us. And we try as much as possible to actually integrate ourselves within their teams so that we can build that relationship, utilizing their resources, showcasing the expertise on both sides. I think has been very successful for us, at least since I've joined. So looking forward to being able to share anecdotes of me either getting lost or falling downstairs or things of that nature very soon with all of you.
We'll remind you of that promise. Now, really, it's a wonderful industry to work in. It's very international, and I think we all go through very exciting little adventures and anecdotes, and we all make mistakes. And now the thing is, of course, in any relationship or any business relationship, to make sure that you try to reduce those mistakes as much as possible. On our end, we try to make sure that when you're looking to meet with agencies, meet with the right ones that are verified and screened. For that, you can come to ICEF, talk to your peers, talk to Sam and Caroline and Oana. So to the audience, I would say, if you have specific questions for Caroline, Oana, or Sam, please email us at marketing@icef.com. If you have specific questions for ICEF, you can mail us as well. I saw one question coming through, if we could name some successful agencies. There are many, so if I would start naming them, that would be a very long webinar, and if I stood naming a few, I'd miss out on others that would have deserved being mentioned. So for that, simply come to an ICEF event, I would say. Sam, Oana, Caroline, thank you so much for a full hour of your time shared with us. I look forward to seeing you at one of our events in 2020.
See you in Berlin, in Dubai.
In Dubai, yeah, in February in Dubai, Middle Eastern events. So to the audience, icef.com/events. All the events are listed there. And thanks for an hour exactly of another ICEF webinar. You can find more webinars on icef.com/webinars and so forth and so forth. Thank you very much and have a great evening, Sam and Oana, and a great day, Caroline.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Merci.
Bye.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci.